Hey guys, thank you so much for all of the support and sharing the podcast and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed already, please, what are you doing? Subscribe. This helps me out so much so I can continue this. And I really do want to continue the podcast. I think it's so much fun. I get to have these awesome conversations with people who I feel like are like way out of my league. But if you have not followed me on social media already, it's at Jeff Gruby on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Go ahead and share with me your maybe your favorite podcast episode. That'd be a really awesome thing. And I think you're really going to love today's guests. All right. Take care, guys, and take care of yourself. Hey, everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by Vivo Life. Now, we all know how important protein is to maintain an optimal diet. And me, I'm a busy dad of 2 little kids. And as much as I want to get all of my nutrients from Whole Foods, sometimes I just can't manage to make that happen. And I absolutely need the best quality foods so I can recover from my workouts and sustain my energy so I can show up and be the dad that I want to be. And that's why over the years, I was on a quest to find the healthiest and cleanest protein powder that I can use after my workouts. So what I do is I mix a scoop of Vivo Life Perform in with my post-workout recovery meal, which is oatmeal, blueberries, flaxseed. And it tastes amazing. I love it. So not only does Vivo meet the criteria I need, it also is environmentally friendly as well. It's 100% plant-based protein, and the flavor is extremely smooth compared to other protein powders I've tried out there. Part of the reason is they use fermented protein, which is the healthiest protein that you can have for your digestive system, especially mine. On top of that, it has amazing ingredients like turmeric, ginger, and reishi mushrooms. What's so freaking awesome is that Vivo Life stands behind their product, and if you don't feel the difference in 30 days, they give you a full refund, no questions asked. So I get it. We're all unique. We're all different. We have different preferences. You be the judge yourself. Go to vivolife.com, and at the checkout, use the coupon code PERFECT10 for 10% off your first order. And by the way, my favorite flavor is the banana and cinnamon. It's about growing as a person. Your best is completely unique to you. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me on episode 31 of the Fuck Perfect podcast. I'm here with Tracy, a global HR leader. Thank you so much for being on the call, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And so can you give the listener sort of a rundown, a cherry-picked version of who you are and how you got here? You can go all the way back to us 5 years old or 5 years ago.
Definitely not 5. We've been here for a long time. So I am in HR, as you said, and it's been a really interesting ride on kind of where I got. So now I'm to a point where I lead a large team supporting a large company. Specifically working with businesses and with employees, trying to navigate like the day-to-day and as well as the strategic future for the company. But if I go back to where I started, it's really funny. In high school and even when I started into college, my parents were always like, "Oh, we're so proud of you," but I never really knew what I wanted to do, so they didn't have high expectations for me. It was kind of funny. It's like a family joke now. And I ended up majoring in HR because that's what my sister did. And so I was like, oh, cool, she did it. Let's do that. I had no idea what it was about. But the cool thing is, as I was going through business school, I found out I really like it. It's not just, I think the biggest misnomer is go into HR because you're a people person. It's more than that. It's so much more. You have to know finance, and you have to know law, and you have to know like just basically a jack of all trades. So I started majoring in that. And then after I graduated, my first job out of college was probably one of the most tough jobs I've ever had. It was working in the unemployment office of all places. So like the unemployment office.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
The person who makes the decision on whether or not you get money when you're in probably the toughest point of your entire life without a job and like trying to support a family. So that was really tough for a 22-year-old, but it was really great because it taught me a lot of hard lessons out of the gate on how to deal with people's emotions, how to navigate really sensitive areas that you're talking about when you go through all different facets of HR. And also how to kind of build up this muscle around separating yourself from the emotion or what your personal emotion is. So I think a lot of times when we're in a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
I think I was talking to Emily one day and I said, hey, you know, people are messy. And I think that's true. Like, I don't know any person who's been like perfect life, clean life, nothing's ever messy about their life. And so you got to be able to deal with the messy. That just is indicative of being human. So that was a really great experience, and it was a really tough experience at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And then after that, I ended up going into recruiting. And then I was able to, I was living in Florida and I said, hey, I really want to see what it's like in Massachusetts. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a house to go to or like anywhere to live. And I one day just told my parents, hey, I think I'm moving to Massachusetts just to see what's there. So I packed up.
Why did you choose Massachusetts?
I don't know. I had gone to high school in New Hampshire, but I had wanted to just see what it was like to live in a big city like Boston.
Uh-huh.
I was living in Tampa and it was like, it's okay, but it's very transient. Um, so yeah, I found I through a friend of a friend of a friend, I found there were 4 gentlemen who were looking for a 5th roommate. And so I didn't know them, but I said, sure, that sounds like a great thing. So I moved to Boston and with 4 guys who I didn't know, no job, no real life plan or anything like that, just to kind of see what happened. And it was probably one of the best moves I ever made. I ended up finding a 10-year career with a company who eventually brought me to Austin. I met my husband, Nick, there. I made some great friends and relationships, but I think it was like one of those moments where, again, it was like self-testing myself and learning as I go. And it all kind of helped me in my career because one of the interesting things about being in human resources is a lot of times people talk about like, oh, what's the policy, or HR has like a process, but the fundamental of like how policies are derived or processes or how you deal with an irate employee is really at the gut reaction of the HR person. Like those are all derived out of just us trusting that we know the right decisions in that
Mm-hmm.
very complicated moment. And so you have to kind of get used to trusting your gut. And I think that that move to Boston was one of those moments where it was a stepping stone on me trusting my gut, right? I was like, this feels like the right thing to do. All signs point to no, but I'm going to do it anyways because that's what it feels like.
That's that's hilarious. That's how I moved to Austin. Um, we were, my daughter was born, and as a teacher, I was like, I don't want her to go to school in California. So we researched the best schools that had no snow because I didn't want to be. It's not that I don't like snow. I don't want to be trapped indoors when all I need is water to go outside. And so that led me to Texas, and I went to all different cities. And I was like, man, I don't want to go to Austin, but everyone says Austin's great. And so on paper, it looked like it was all a yes. And I was like, I didn't know why I was pulled to it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I have to go with this. It seems like the most crazy thing. We don't have any family here or friends, but it just felt like this is where we had to go. It was like a leap of faith. And so I was like, boom, and it's been an incredible move. And so you're talking about that with Boston, how it kind of shaped you and who you
Mhm.
are, right?
Yeah, for sure. And even the move here, I'd been with the company for about I guess it was around 8 years at that point. And um, my husband and I were just like, hey, Massachusetts is, not great for us. We had just had my son and it's super expensive. Daycare was more than the mortgage on our house, which is a problem. So it was
Yeah.
a lot of money. So, we basically said, where do we want to go? And somehow we narrowed down to Asheville, North Carolina or Austin, Texas. We hadn't been to either one. I hadn't even really read any articles, but they just sounded like a good time. So I talked to my company, and through networking and things like that, they said, hey, this role's open in Austin. So I took the job. I'd never been to Texas. I'd never been to Austin, didn't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
I came here on a house hunting trip after I'd accepted the role, and I couldn't find any houses I liked. So we went, when I was back in Mass, I was looking online, like on Redfin or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I found the house we're in today online. So we purchased it online, sight unseen. And we realized after we purchased it that my husband was like, that address sounds so familiar. Like, why does it sound so familiar? Turns out his cousin, who he hadn't spoken to in 30 years, is 4 houses down from us.
Uh-huh.
Didn't know that.
Wow.
And so we ended up coming here, and it's been perfect. But it was, again, like, he hadn't been to Texas. We just kind of said, I feel like that's the right move to make. And it's by far probably one of the best decisions we've made as a couple, coming here, because it's just, work-life balance is so much better. And
Oh, totally.
like, there's never anything you can't do in Austin. You're out and about, so it's like perfect. So in that, I mean, in coming here opened up the opportunities to continue with my career progression as well as his. We were kind of boxed in the roles that we had back in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really hard, cutthroat environment, and not that Austin isn't, but there was more here that was opened up to us.
Totally. We
It
felt
was,
the same way in California. I felt boxed in as a teacher. Emily felt boxed in what she was doing. Coming to Austin, she also she didn't visit. I just said let's go here, and we did that.
yep.
And when I was looking at houses, I was like, oh my god, did I make the wrong? Because when I was looking in person. I was like, oh my god, I'm not sure if I made the right decision there. Uh, but yeah, and then she had the opportunity to go from her limited experience to be. I mean, her book that she published is what got her a job at Dell. The book that
Mm,
she self-published, and there's always that curse of people talk about, oh, if you self-publish, you're just dooming yourself, like but that's what got her the job. And it's all these opportunities kind of opened up, and I felt like that work-life balance was there in
mhm,
terms of like people that are here, even if there is the same company in other areas, like the people that are here running it understand that work-life balance, and and it feels like there's more family opportunities here as
mhm.
well. And just really kind of like, wow, this is really awesome.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think, it's so interesting when you talk about, the fact that her self-published book is kind of what got her that opportunity. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing with when I think through my career. I've only interviewed for 2 jobs in my life. Um, outside of like the very first, working at Burger King or stuff like that. But like when I
Did
talk
you
about,
work at
like,
Burger King?
I did in high school. It was fantastic. um, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the roles that I've gotten, the promotions that I've gotten have all been through networking and through just like getting my career aspirations verbalized and out there, right? So I think one of the worst things people can do is say, what is my career path? Like, what is the journey I want to be on? What is the specifically the career pathing that I want to take? If I could take one word out of the dictionary, it'd be career path. I hate that word, because I think career path just in itself signifies one way. There's only one way to go on the path
Mm,
and that way. And careers, like humans, are messy. They're all over the place. People take lateral roles. Sometimes it's better to take a demotion in order to get ahead, because that will give you experiences that in the long run will give you a larger role. Sometimes you take a chance and you decide to go somewhere with no real opportunity at hand, but it's going to be a better move for you. So I always like talk about like, what's your career aspiration? What do you want to, what's your end result? And then how can you organically make that happen along the way? And I think the fact that she was able to get that role at Dell through self-publishing the book is a great example around, she probably didn't say, I'm going to publish this book so I can get this job. She
Right.
probably said in her life, I know I eventually want to be doing this type of work, but let me work on things organically and see how they come along. So they're all
Yeah.
stepping stones, but it's anything but a career path.
Yeah, and I think it also kind of parallels goal setting, right? Where you have people will have a goal, an end goal, right? And they get so stubborn and inflexible about how they're going to get there.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that it could just be this complete, it could just go all over the place. Uh, and then eventually you wind up, hey, I'm actually getting there. I'm actually going towards it. You know, like when I think about me as a 6-year-old daydreaming about helping women with their problems and their child could read my Dr. Seuss books while I was a 6-year-old therapist. It's like I was like that kind of dictated my entire life of I kept finding areas where I could help people, um, and I got into helping, not just moms or women, but just people when they're with their perceptions. And I got into teaching and creating safe environments and
Mhm.
respect. And it's just kind of like I kind of figure out, okay, I want to help people. I want to have a lot of influence, and I still realize, oh, I didn't go about it the way I wanted to as an actor, right? My end goal was being an actor, but the overall idea of influencing people, like, oh, teaching, coaching, podcasts, like, oh, it's still influencing people, and like, oh yeah, I'm on that path, and that actually brings me back to when interesting thing, how we even met at I think even how the conversation got started was I was reading a Sean Acor book, or is it Acor?
Yep.
Anyways, a happiness advantage,
Yep.
and you had um, struck up a conversation at the karate school about it, and I was like, that just that conversation, like if I wasn't on my path doing my thing and you're doing your path, like we wouldn't have that thing in common to even
Mhm.
talk about, which I think is is really interesting. And do you so were you interested, like did you follow that because of your HR path, or do you think you always um underneath were interested in kind of human psychology or why people do things before
Yeah.
that?
I mean, the joke is, if you're in HR, you're also a part-time therapist. Like, I think that I think that just being in my profession, there is some underlying root of you're interested in psychology, right? And so like I do say, I've taken, that general psychology class. I don't have a psychology degree by any means, but
Right.
it's human psychology does fascinate me. And there's a lot of things that you learn in psychology that make my job possible or easier, or ways for me to connect. Because I think one of the biggest things is, if you talk about HR, like the stigma of we're scary people who are just out to fire the world,
But
right?
yeah, my favorite show is The Office, right there. Steve
Yeah,
Carell and Toby
terrible.
the HR, right?
Absolutely terrible. Yeah, and so in order to kind of overcome that stigma and really start to impact the people around you, and you have to gain their trust. You have to understand how their mind works. And one of my favorite things or to say is, perception is reality. The
Hmm.
fact of the matter is, if somebody perceives something to be true, it then becomes their reality, regardless if it's the real world or not. And so if somebody perceives me to be scary or out to get them or not empathetic or not understanding, what's going on in their world, um, the reality is I'm not going to be able to be impactful for them or effective or really be able to create a relationship with them. And so I'm constantly trying to figure out what is your perception and how can I make your reality be the real world, and the fact that I'm trying to like help you and I want to be, with you. I think one of the best examples of that was I was working for our company. We had to do a large layoff. So we unfortunately were doing a product transfer in the manufacturing environment. The manufacturing was moving to another location. And so I had been working with this group for quite some time, and we were trying to find jobs for the manufacturers so that they didn't have to leave. We wanted to retain them even with the product transfer. And there was this gentleman who was very kind of standoffish from me. He just saw me as like that big bad HR person who had just done a reduction in force and so didn't want to talk to me or anything. But in the background, I actually was working really, really hard to find him a role because I thought he was tremendous. And so one day in the break room, I heard him talking to another employee about The Walking Dead. And he was like, "Did you see what happened on that last episode of The Walking Dead?" And then they like transitioned into Game of Thrones and kind of like what's happening.
Uh-huh.
So then I just chatted them up. I was like, "Oh, yeah, I did see that episode of The Walking Dead." And it was so funny because he was like, "You mean you actually watch shows like that?" And I was like, "Yes, I do have a soul and a heart on the inside. I'm
Yeah.
human. Those are things that interest me." And it was like, that was the thing that I needed to break his perception, which was his reality of me. From that moment on, I think every single day we were talking about Game of Thrones or The Walking Dead. Turns out he read the entire comic book series as well and
Mm-hmm.
read all the Game of Thrones books. So we were talking about like what's different and things like that. And he ended up becoming like a really good friend at work, and he really felt supported. And he even said to me later, like, if I had known that you liked things other than this one thing, I probably would have warmed up to you
Uh-huh.
sooner. But I
You can
thought this is the
you
only
can
way that you
shorten the
are.
sentence. You can say, "If I would have known that you liked things."
Right? But it's true. So it's so funny. You are always embedded in psychology and HR profession. There's psychology in kind of how you're growing your career too, right? So one of the biggest things when I talk about what's your career aspiration, I always say don't focus on a title, right? So don't say I want to be vice president. Don't say I want to be, leader of the free world or whatever that title is.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about like what is it that's going to fill your cup? What is it that you want to work towards, right? So in your case, it was helping people. Your aspiration was, I want to get to a place where I want to help people. And you may have had actor as like the title on it, but I
Yep.
think the thing that you found along the way was you're filling your cup and helping people, but it's not based on a title that you randomly selected.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's the trap that people get into all the time is they always work towards the title and not the
Mm-hmm.
aspiration. So
Mm-hmm.
throw the title out because I got news for you. Titles really don't matter. You could be vice president, but are you vice president at a 500-person company or a
You
5,000
know what's
person
funny is
company?
when I became a health coach and everyone writes CEO of My Name Fitness, I'm like, but are you? Like, I guess you are, but that doesn't mean anything. And
Right?
and when I saw that, I realized what you just said. I was like, this title is just bogus. And I talked to Nick obviously a lot when we were in classes. And one of the things that always got me was this is I think in line a good segue. Uh, what always got me irritated was self-appointed titles, and specifically I'm talking about health coaches. Even though I was a self-appointed title, it's like getting the degree first and then going to college and is your choice. Whereas I got the title and then I actually went to school and learned a lot about
about health and mindset. Whereas other people get the title and like, yeah, I'm just going to skip it. And so these self-appointed titles or this focus on titles drives me nuts. And so I've been really anti-title and we're like, look, but what are my actions? What are my, aspirations? And I think if you were to look back at me seeking a title of an actor, trying to influence a great amount of people, and now I'm trying to influence, I'd say, still a great amount of people, that aspect is the same. And so in terms of the Fuck Perfect podcast, like there's no perfect way for me to get from, maybe in my path there could be many ways of supporting the actions of what I, filling my cup. And I know you wanted to talk about that. So where, like, how does that fit in, and what can we say to people about the pursuit of a title or just or of a career path?
Yeah. So I think when I think about people and working towards their career aspirations, there's like two things that come to mind that frequently people get confused about or they misunderstand. I think who actually owns your career? And then what does that mean in terms of where you are now and where you're gonna go? And I think the first biggest thing, the thing I come across the most in HR is I feel like I can't grow because my boss didn't give me this promotion, or my boss didn't tell me about that opportunity that was going to come up in this other
Sure.
area of the company, right? So there's like this a little bit of a misperception that you don't own the steps leading to where you're going, and that you're gonna, if you do a great job at your job and you are always given praise and somebody's going to give you what your career is and say, yeah, here's your next promotion, or did you know that they're hiring this job over in this function? I think you should go. That is one way to do it, right? So we go through promotions and stuff like that. But I think the onus of owning the career is on you. You need to be in control of it. And there's different ways that you can do it, right? I think I'd already talked about, like, I haven't really applied for a lot of jobs. Many of the jobs I've gotten have been through networking. And it wasn't networking like me calling people up saying, hey, I want to be, I don't know, a senior manager. Do you have that job available? It was anything but that. It was a continuous dialogue that I had with anybody who would listen to me to the point of irritation about, this is where I want to go in life. That's what it was about. When we got the opportunity to come to Austin, I didn't go to the people who gave me the opportunity and said, I want to move to Austin, make it happen. What I was doing was I was sharing my career aspiration. Yeah, I think, at some point we want to get out of Massachusetts. We're open to a couple of different areas. I'm working on building these skill sets so that when the opportunity comes available, I'm ready. And through that dialogue and continuously reaching out and just verbalizing what my aspiration was, people listen. And so when that opportunity comes available, they go, oh yeah, I just talked to Tracy like 2 months ago. I wonder if she's still interested in that type of thing. And it wasn't just people in my company, it was people outside my company. And so the one actionable thing that, if there's one thing anybody who's listening to this podcast could take away, it would be getting your own board of directors. I'm a huge proponent of that. And so if you think about any good company, they have a board of directors. And what does the board of directors do? So the board of directors acts as the counterbalance to what the CEO and the CFO and all the leaders of the company are trying to do. They have to bring strategies to them. And the board says, yeah, that feels right, or it feels a little off balance, or they have to bring problems to the board, and the board might have networked people that they can bring to the CEO to kind of help solve that problem. And so you need to treat yourself like your own company and get your own board of directors. And the way that you create your board of directors is by looking at your own network. And chances are you already have people on your board and you don't even realize it. So I'm going to use me for example. My mother is on my board of directors. She is my sounding board for any emotional decision I'm looking to make. She doesn't have the answer for me, but she's my emotional counterbalance, right? So she'll go, Tracy, that sounds like you're a little wound up right now. I would sleep on it and then come back tomorrow and tell me how you feel, right? Or I have a former boss who I really value, and she's on my board as like the HR expert, knowing like what my field is like. So she'll say whether or not that feels like a solid opportunity or not.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody on my board of directors is telling me the answer. But what I'll do is when I'm faced with a problem, I probably have about 5 or 7 people on my board. When I'm faced with a problem, I'll cherry pick the board members who can probably answer that problem the
Mm-hmm.
best, at least advise that problem the best. And then I'll give them a call and I'll share my problem with them and I'll get counseling from them. And then I can make a decision. So it's something that people already have. They just haven't labeled it their board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
And then in some spots, you should look at your board and say, is there a gap? Is there somebody on my board who knows what I want in life, or somebody who knows my profession? And if I don't, let me go find somebody to fill that spot. And you can even say, hey, would you mind if I call you every once in a while to get counseling and advice? I'd love to make you part of my board. And people are surprisingly like okay with that. They're like, oh yeah, sure, anytime. Um, so I think that's like one of the biggest things. If I were to start at step one, like what is the thing you should do? Get your own board of directors so that you can start making sure you're progressing towards your aspiration in a
Mm-hmm.
very solid way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. They have just having more input to help you, and the board, like you were talking about earlier, will give you multiple perspectives outside of your own, which is
Mhm.
something that we have value. That's actually what I talk about. Why I even went into acting. Like the reason I was interested in acting was it allowed you to don different roles and different perspectives, and I was really interested in other people's perspectives, and hence probably what you see me talking about on social media. I'm like, I'm very interested in other people's perspectives, and then sometimes I'll try one on, and it's like, "Rah!" I'm like, okay, that's not one that people like. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and
But yeah.
I think it's also important in that board, don't get people who just agree with you. I
Oh
have
yeah.
somebody on my board of directors who is willing to call shenanigans at any point of time. Say, listen, I feel like you want this to go one way. I'm going to tell you what the reality of the
Mm-hmm.
situation is. Somebody who is so, and I got the idea of the board of directors from this book called Who's Got Your Back, which
Mm-hmm.
is basically all about, how do you create that board of directors? But it's something that, I think people sometimes look at their career as like this mythical thing that they can't, navigate because there's so many, uncharted waters.
Yeah.
But giving yourself tools and resources to ground your decisions as you go probably lead to more um, of a filled cup with your aspiration.
Totally. And I think to maybe clarify for people too, and I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, board of directors should not be your 5 closest friends, right?
Correct.
Because those people will probably just tell you what you want to hear, or you've been around those people so long that you all kind of think in the same way, here and there a little different, but it's really important when we talk about career paths specifically. You could have a friend or a relative, right? But you also want to have those career and really outside people who just aren't that close 5 circle of friendships.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the way I've cultivated my board, it's people who work inside my company or I've worked with in the past, people who I've never worked with before, but maybe are in my field who can shed some light. I do have some relatives in my board. And then I also have people who I would say have nothing really to do with my field per se, but I somehow connected with at some point, and I think that they have a valued perspective on kind of what I'm doing. And I don't call all of them. Sometimes, you know, there's a couple of people on my board. There was, for example, there was a work problem I was trying to solve, and it was outside my expertise. It wasn't like a true HR problem. And there was this person on my board who I don't think I talked to him maybe in 4 years. It'd been a while, but we respected each other. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, there's this problem that I'm trying to solve, and I'm trying to like figure out where to go. Can I pick your brain for a little bit? And he was more than happy to. He said, yeah, let's schedule an hour. I'll sit down. I think we ended up talking for almost 2 hours. It was just such good dialogue. And he offered to, you know, for me to call him again. And, you know, that's a situation. Am I really close friends with that person? Absolutely not. What I'm acquaintances with that person, and I respect that person professionally. I know that they respect me, even though we're not in the same field. So you need to think of a wide net when you create your board so that you have opposing personalities, to get the perception versus reality kind of out of the way.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. And I've even bumped into people too, or not bumped in, but like I have, you know, certain friends that maybe we have some things in common, but we disagree on other things, like really like adamantly disagree. But the disagreement is super respectful because we like it's not just the one way. For example, like I'll be plant based, and my other friend is you know completely other direction, right? And sometimes we'll joke with each other about it, but at the same time, we will still go back and forth in respect and ask each other nutrition questions, because it's not like you know someone's perspective isn't completely null and void because they don't overlap. And a lot of times having someone in the opposite side of things with different opinions is really, really good and healthy. And also kind of, you know, challenges us to be like, why do I think this way? Right. And obviously with career paths, I think, you know, going from, for me, working at a deli and Best Buy and a nonprofit, then teaching and coaching and a startup, like I've just kind of gone all over, but it's all been like I said before, the underlining values have been there. And at least because you're bringing your person, you're bringing your personality to the job, right? You're bringing who you are, your soul, your heart, and everything. And that's the almost the constant. So you're going to be who you are in every job you have, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think, and the other thing, it kind of reminds me of this other thing that kind of comes up is like, we're talking a lot about how you kind of own your career. And I think that there is a component where the leaders own your career to some degree, right? So like if there's opportunities, making sure that you know about them. But I think one of the biggest things that's overlooked as far as the leader's role in your career is the willingness to let you go. I think that that's like a big sticking point. There's so many times I've come across where a leader is very supportive of somebody. They send them to classes and they give them training, they give them opportunities. But that person's hit the max of their potential in that role for that leader. But the leader doesn't want to let them go because they're so good. They're like,
Yeah.
I want to grow
I was going to bring
them,
that up.
but I don't want to let them go, right? Good leaders will help that person grow inside and outside the company. And there's a situation that I came across in my time, and this is a very basic example, but I've seen it played out so many times where, you know, there's a person who, there is a cap for every person at every company. You're going to hit a ceiling at some point. And so like, let's take an executive assistant, right? You might start out as an admin assistant, helping directors and things like that, maybe managing an office, but eventually you're going to grow and you might become the executive assistant to the CEO. But maybe this is a 500 person company and you feel stagnant and you want to take on more responsibility. That company can only give you so much responsibility because it's only so big and you're already supporting like the top person of the company. And so a good leader would look at that situation and say, I know that you want to continue to grow. So let me help you network and find an opportunity, another company where I know you're going to have more headroom to continue to grow in the thing that you want to grow in, versus I'm going to try to give you a salary increase and a promotion, like a title that doesn't mean anything because you're not getting more responsibility. So at the end of the day, you still feel unfulfilled, but you have a new title to show for it. And then they end up just giving titles and money and just trying to throw that at the problem versus saying, no, I really need to support this person in a better way and help them grow, which may include leaving the company. And that's okay. That's like part of life, and that's part of just growing your career. But too many times people like go, you can't leave. You're the best one we have here.
You know what's really interesting about that is the dynamic of teaching. Is that when I was thinking like, okay, what is like, because good leader is very subjective, right? The definition can be subjective, and so, but I thought, well, there's part of it is a good leader definitely is, like you said, supporting of the person, and if the person is really really good at their job, it makes the leader's job easier, right? And I'll see, but at the same time, the leader's job is not, quote, defined as easy by any means. It's not. I don't even think hard or easy are in difficulties in the definition of a leader, right? But maybe it's about making difficult decisions, sure. And so what I was thinking about was like, as a teacher, you would teach a grade, and this happened to me every time. You teach a grade in the beginning of the year, like, oh, these are the fresh ones. I gotta get them, gotta sculpt them, I gotta develop them, I gotta get them to where I want to be. At the end of the year, you're like, yes, now things are easier. Either you're on the top of your game, and then it's like you gotta, oh, you gotta say goodbye. And you're like, no, I gotta start all over, and then boom. And so I had this idea, is like, teachers are basically, by definition, good leaders. Maybe not good teachers, but good leaders, because they're growing and developing and passing on, and they started over. And I was thinking about this when you were talking of how a leader's job is to grow, cultivate, and support the person. And some people will stay. Maybe some people will repeat the grade, right? Some people will be happy staying. And those that are not and that want to go up, you gotta be, okay, I gotta let you go, because it's my job to train the next person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you bring up a really valid point. Some people are happy where they are. And I think that there's like this misconception that if you're not continuously aspiring for the next thing, then there's something fundamentally wrong, right? But I think that we also need to own, sometimes there's those people who, want to conquer the world. They want to take on more and more and more. And then some people get to a point in their career and it's doing exactly what they love. They feel like their cup is filled. It's they don't want anymore. And I think sometimes leaders struggle, especially in the work environment, because they look at that person and say they're a blocker, or they don't, they're not promotable, or they're not really, they're my solid B player because they don't want to do anything else. And that's not true. It's the fact of the matter is, if there's somebody who is really enjoying what they do and they're really pushing it, I think it's our job to help expose them to as much as they want to be exposed to in terms of growth. But if they're truly fulfilled, then that's okay too. It's not, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that,
Mm-hmm.
because if anything, we should be all hoping to get to the point where we feel
Totally.
cup is filled and that's what we want to do for the rest of our lives.
And there is that weird dynamic between growth and gratitude, right?
Mhm.
You're like, all right, should I be growing or should I be more grateful? Like, what if I'm super grateful for what I have right now and I don't need to grow as much? Maybe there's a different area to grow in. And it's like, I always think about this. Like, if you're really grateful for everything you have, how do you justify growth? And that still confuses me today. And I try to do both. And I was actually thinking too, when you're talking about affirmations are a huge perspective thing, because we are constantly, I'm not sure what the opposite of an affirmation is, just bad words, I guess. We constantly are putting these bad thoughts in our heads. And so, and that's our perspective. And affirmations, people say this is what you have to tell yourself these other perspectives that are true. A lot of times people think, affirmations are, oh, I'm just lying to myself. Well, choose a different affirmation then. Choose a different thing to say that you do believe is true. And this
Mhm.
and this perspective will help you, like, just see things differently. And sometimes even you, like, I'm kind of jumping around. I remember going to HEB, and for people that are not in Texas, HEB is a grocery store. I remember going to HEB and I heard the guy going to get shopping carts, and he was talking to someone else. How's your day? Had a conversation, and he said, I can't complain. I've got a good job. I got a good truck, and I've got a good girl. And not that he has a girl, but he's in a relationship. And that was his perspective. He's like, and for me looking in, I'm like, that's not my perspective of like how I would feel if I had those things. But
Yeah.
that guy, and this happened like 4 years ago, and it still sticks with me. Those little, like that, I reminded of him and how he's come super content and happy with where his life is at. And that's
Mhm.
okay, right?
Yep.
So, and that's what you're kind of saying about how it's okay to maybe be satisfied in your career or in your life and like, this is all I need.
Yeah. I mean, there's countless stories of people who others may perceive as not reaching their full potential, but that person perceives it as like, I'm doing what I love. I don't
Right.
care that I don't have, a Bentley and live in a posh neighborhood. And I don't care that I don't get out and go on trips every other year. It's not about that for me. I'm doing the thing that I love. And whether or not that's somebody who is grown up on a farm and has farmed their entire life and has never been to a place like a city like New York City, they don't have a desire to, because
Mm-hmm.
they love what they're doing, they love the community around them, and they feel super happy in what they're doing. Or it's that person who has accomplished a lot, subjectively, because I guess that's even something that you could debate. And they, live in this high-rise apartment, but then now they feel happy. So nobody's wrong here. It's all about what is important to you
Mm-hmm.
and what is it that you are aspiring to have. And every aspiration is valid. Every single one of them has impact and value, as long as you're working towards that, whatever it is. And when you get there, if you get there, because I know I'm not there and I don't know if I'm going to get there. But if you do end up in a place where you feel like I got there, I did everything I wanted to do, then I would say that you're a pretty lucky person, because there's a lot of people who never get there. And so
Right.
in some ways, I would say I'm slightly jealous of those who feel like they've gotten there.
Yeah. I mean, and it's true. Like, Tony Robbins talks about how he could have, you know, uh, you know, 8,000 person audience, and how, every single person is not fulfilled, whether they make, multiple millions of dollars or not. But then some, farmer in a third world country is completely happy. Right.
Hmm.
It's like, and I guess society constantly says to other people, but don't you want more? But don't you, what else? What else? Like, it's weird, right? But
Yeah.
anyways, so what do you got going on next in your life? What are you working on next?
Yeah. I think right now I'm just trying to, continue to work on me. I think, like I said, I haven't gotten to the place where I feel like I've done everything that I want to do. And I think it's for me just trying to figure out what are the things that I can control in my life to continue moving me forward to the places and the things that I want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is I never have like I have to be X by the time I'm 45, or like I try not to put deadlines on it. But I think as long as I'm making forward progress, that's what kind of keeps me happy and keeps me motivated and driven.
Absolutely. That's I love that. And that's exactly what even I talk about in the podcast is progress over everything else. Like that's all you need to worry about. If it's like maybe you do go 2 steps back and then eventually you go 3 steps forward, right? Or you go 0.1 step forward. Right? But yeah.
Some days it feels like a step, some days it feels like a leap, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still forward.
Well, thank you so much for doing the podcast, Tracy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I really love the conversation.
Yeah. All right. And I'll let you know when it goes live. It'll probably be, I think in like in the end of August is when it's probably going to go.
Very cool. Awesome.
Cool. All
Thank
right.
you
Well, say hi to everyone for me.
Will do. You too.
Thanks. Bye.